trepidation about lecturing a workforce committee about workforce, but it's even more important to do everything we can to get willing people back to work. And you know, the willing part is something that's a different issue for us these days than it has been. The other thing I wanted to mention, just draw to your attention, is that many of you know that United Van Lines keeps a record of people they move in and out of states. And for the last year, they count, of course, you all know that more people are moving out of Ohio every year than into it. And the number of people that say that job was the most important reason for moving out is the leading reason for moving in or moving out. The point I wanted to make about this is there's only about 1% difference between the people who move out of Ohio for a job and the people who move into Ohio for a job. If we do a few things like you all are planning to do here, I think we could really have some expansion in the state. I'd be happy to respond to any questions and commend you to my testimony.
Thank you, sir. Just looked through it, and it is very tight and well done. So somebody's looking after you, right?
Yes, sir.
Good deal. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. We do have written only a number of these, and I refer you to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 that I count, pieces of written testimony that should be on your iPads. Any further questions from the committee on 131 today? Seeing none, that concludes our second hearing on Senate Bill 131. Next item on our agenda is the third hearing on Senate Bill 126, Senators Coonsey and Gavarone, to enact Collin's Law, the Ohio anti-hazing bill. In person, to begin, we have Cory and Sheri Foltz. And you may both approach the podium when you're ready. And welcome, and thank you very much for coming in today.
Thank you. Chairman Johnson, Vice Chair Serino, Ranking Member Williams of the Senate and Workforce and Higher Education Committee, thank you for allowing us to testify in support of Senate Bill 126, Collin's Law, anti-hazing law. This is my husband, Cory Foltz, and I am Sheri Foltz. We are proud parents of Stone, AJ, and Jersey Foltz. Our 20-year-old son, firstborn, Stone Justin Foltz, died on March 7th, 2021, just 3 months ago from hazing ritual performed as part of an initiation process with a Pike fraternity at BGSU. A ritual that is passed down year after year, initiation after initiation. We nor you can bring back Stone. Cory and I are here to tell you what happened to Stone and how our lives are forever changed. We want you to hear some of the details so you can have a firsthand account of how we believe Stone would be alive today if Senate Bill 126 had become law. Before I begin, to the committee members, I would like you to think of one of your loved ones, whether it be your son, daughter, grandson, granddaughter, niece, or nephew, as you listen to our story of how Stone died, because you too could be impacted by hazing at some point in your life if you haven't already. We never ever thought it would happen to us either. In the early morning hours of March 5th, 2021, we received the call that all parents hope and pray they never receive. We were told by the Wood County Sheriff's Office that our son was in cardiac arrest and we needed to get to Bowling Green, Ohio immediately. I was the one speaking with the officer and knew immediately it was related to some activity Stone had to perform with a fraternity that he had told me about only hours earlier. I won't take you through the details of the next 96 hours we spent in the hospital as we worked through all the decisions that needed to be made and the heartbreak over and over as we learned that his condition was worsening. Stone had made the brave decision at 16 to be an organ donor. He was always thinking about others. If any of you have been through organ donation, you know the process is long and hard, as Stone's body needed to be prepared and tested constantly for the donation. The viability of each possible organ needed to meet standards, and recipient matches across the country needed to be found. Around the clock, careful watch by nurses and doctors was required to help make Stone's last wish a possibility as we walked proudly beside him on March 8th, as we made the hero walk through the hospital to the operating room. We kissed and hugged Stone and told him we loved him deeply and said our final goodbye. We never heard words in return. As we were in the hospital, we had to learn the details of how he was hazed over the prior month and how he was taken to a basement blindfolded the night of March 4th and forced to drink excessive amounts of alcohol. Stone's blood alcohol level was 0.394, 5 times the level of the legal amount. How can that possibly be? I just talked with him. The details I just shared with you are hard to speak, but are necessary to understand why we believe Senate 126 would have saved Stone's life. Stone reached out to us during his freshman year to tell us he was researching fraternity life. We specifically remember him telling him to make sure he was doing his research. After a few weeks, he told us he had found 2 frats he for sure would not join because one was big into cocaine and the other one put drugs into young girls' drinks. Stone made the decision that year not to join any fraternity, and his reasons were that he was not able to find one that did not do illegal drugs and that he wanted to focus on school. In early February 2021, much to our surprise, Stone told me he was joining a fraternity. We do not know why the quick decision, but I made sure to ask him a lot of questions, and he provided these answers. He told me the rush process was starting and that he wanted to join because of the networking possibilities. Stone went on to tell me how all the guys in Pike seemed really nice, and he already made many new friends. In fact, he said some of them were from Delaware, Ohio, or nearby the area where he grew up. He felt a connection. He also shared the same information with his aunt, who had experienced Greek life. She asked additional questions on Stone and tried to do some research on the BGSU-specific fraternities, but could not find anything specific about the fraternity that raised any red flags. She, too, supported Stone and told him to continue to be smart about his decisions. I referenced earlier that Stone died as a result of a ritual, one that involves excessive amounts of alcohol, a family brand that is passed down to pledges during each new initiation. This was not a party. It was an organized, repetitive initiation ritual that current members themselves have been part of when they were initiated. In our opinion, we believe that each year these rituals are becoming riskier as each big brother escalates the activity to outperform others. But here is the deal. Stone thought these guys were his friends because they were soon to be his brothers. He trusted them, yet none of these brothers were around to help. In fact, they just took him to his apartment, closed the door, and left him behind and never saw him again. For decades, kids continue to lose their lives, suffer serious injuries, and experience lifelong emotional problems as a result of hazing. Sadly, our story is not unique. The number of messages we have received from people all over this country where victims have suffered from hazing are too numerous to count. These messages are from victims in their 60s to current students in all age groups in between. This is and has been an epidemic, and the current laws are not deterring the activities. Maybe even some of you or your friends were hazed, and like these other victims, you made it through the trauma. Maybe you haven't shared the event with anyone. In many cases, the impact is lifelong, as the 60-year-old man shared with us. However, in our case of our son, Stone, or Kathleen and Wade Wyant's son, Colin, they lost their life because of hazing and their simple quest for a brotherhood.
Hazing is abuse, increasing intensity and riskier activities, and when coupled with alcohol, has the power to lead to death. Senate Bill 126 can help eradicate hazing from our culture. and be a large part of the solution that saves lives. The bill provides more education and even more transparency into hazing incidents at a college campus. It helps students and their families make informed decisions about organizations positively impact their lives and organizations that have history of illegal and dangerous behavior. Mandatory reporting serves to both encourage reporting and hazing and also deter hazing itself. If fraternity members know they are subject to reporting and discipline, they will be far less likely to encourage in the behavior. The military academies have successfully done this with cheating. Cheat and you're out. Failure to report cheating and you're out. There's no difference here. Cheating is almost non-existent anymore in the military academies. Penalties are warrant and will in fact deter hazing. The opposition claims there will be no difference because the brains of an 18 to 22-year-old boy aren't fully developed, but severe penalties have deterred bad behavior among kids in other areas. Drunk driving is a good example. While it still exists, there is far less drunk driving because stiffer penalties. Providing severe consequences for poor behavior has been how kids are parented for ages. If serious harm, whether it's physical or emotional, occurs, the consequences should be severe. Hazing is not allowed anywhere. Injuring another human being by engaging in prohibited behavior has always been a criminal consequence. There is no good reason for kids who haze another to death or serious injury to receive just a slap on the wrist. Stiffer penalties will cause many to think twice before engaging in hazing, and will likely give those being hazed more courage to remove themselves from the environment. If hazing causes death or serious injuries, these kids need to know their behavior will follow them for a long time, just as it does the kids who died or harmed by hazing and their families who lost loved ones and are forced to live with this forever. Forcing kids to consume an entire fifth of hard alcohol, leading to stones registering a 0.394 blood alcohol content, must have consequences, and those consequences must be felt. Stronger misdemeanors for hazing does not cause death or serious harm are crucial, because it's the lesser acts of hazing that lead to more serious, dangerous acts in the future. There is no good reason for allowing hazing in any form, no matter big or small. In summary, this is not about emotion. Sheri and I do wake each morning. Our hearts break wide open again and again, knowing our son will never come through the door of our home to give us a hug and a kiss on the cheek that we very much need. However, the only reason we are here today is to put a stop to any form of hazing, therefore saving lives. We've searched high and low for any good reason to allow hazing. Even if it does not cause severe harm, we found no positive impact from this type of behavior. It is time for laws like this to eradicate a practice truly has no place in any civilized society. I'm asking you, please, to help us keep the promise Sheri and I made to Stone on his deathbed. Stone, we love you, and we will fight to the end of our days to help educate and provide visibility to other parents, students, about the deadly impacts of hazing. We will do everything we possibly can keep your memory alive and to never leave anyone behind. This bill needs passed now, and as the current pace at which it's moving increases the risk that we will have another year of uninformed pledging and hazing threatening more young lives, and another parent to prepare for a funeral for their young son or daughter. We pray this never happens to you or someone you know or anyone else in this country. Thank you for allowing Sheri and I this opportunity to share our full support of Senate Bill 126. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you for your testimony. And thank you very much for your courage coming in here today and presenting. We appreciate hearing from you. Are there any questions? Please.
Thanks so much for coming in and testifying and really having the courage to surpass your own heartbreak and tragedy to try to save other lives. I mean, that's very commendable and much appreciated. What is it about this legislation that you think will is the most important part of it to stop this? Is it educating people about hazing? Is it just saying you can't do this? Which bit of this do you think is the most impactful, or that you hope will be the most impactful?
I think it's a combination of both. I do believe if this law does pass, education will be a huge part of it, to educate the kids, these young men and women, what can happen. And I think that would have a huge impact moving forward.
Follow-up? What about the education of the institutions and the leadership in colleges and universities that perhaps sometimes there's looking the other way when it comes to some of these, which some people consider rites of passage, if you will, but we know with such tragic outcomes. Do you think there's a piece in it for educating them as well?
Absolutely. We are currently working with BGSU, President Rogers, Medina students, and the general counselor to work with us as far as a zero tolerance. That is our ultimate goal. We believe there should be zero tolerance at all universities. This will only help with the situation, and along with the education piece of it, we believe that it needs to be out there so that it is impactful to these kids who are coming in, whether it be continue follow-up, whether it's during, hazing prevention week, anything in that sort that we can get out there to these kids of what happens, and also who they can report to, looking at different possibilities of certain apps that are available, working with the local police enforcement. A lot of options, and I think it's important for BGSU to continue to work forward on doing the zero tolerance, as well as working with the other universities, which they are doing.
With the transparency as well, I mean, that would have been huge, and you might have heard in Sheri's piece, she talked about Stone was actually looking into fraternities his freshman year. If there was transparency that Pike had a history of issues or hazing, that would have been transparent to him, as well as we would have been able to research it, and you can educate your son or daughter at that point that this is not a right decision or the right route to take at this time.
Thank you. Thank you again. Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome. And any other questions? You mentioned that your son did research on those fraternities and took a good look at it, because it sounds like he really wanted to wind up in a good fraternity and get the benefits of what a fraternity should offer. How do you think it is that he was able to find out that these fraternities were doing illegal drugs and the university wasn't able to find out that this was going on?
Think of it, a lot of it was word of mouth, through friends, through other fraternities, just talking with them. I think that's a lot of his research consisted of.
Day one, when he moved into campus, the dorms were located right behind all the fraternity housing. And a lot of the fraternity members was receiving discounts to their rent if they would help students move in on day one. So you have a lot of, and personally I've seen it as well, a lot of the fraternity members were soliciting new pledges as they were helping them move in. I mean, Stone received 2 or 3 different business cards from different Greek Life members asking him to stop by, we're having a grill out, come see, you know, what we have to provide. And then when he attended those social gatherings at the Greek Life, that's where he was being exposed to, you know, illegal or improper activity.
Yeah, so, you know, you actually have a national platform here. I mean, your message is going out all across America. And what's your message to, not to the fraternities, but to the leadership of our universities that we trust our young people to?
So, like Sheri had said, we're working with Bowling Green and the university president, and we're putting together 8 different principles that we're trying to focus on. Each university president is in the same mind as us. They want to protect their students, which is our son or our daughters. And I think the best thing we can do is have these universities roll out this zero tolerance with these 8 principles that kind of can lay out over every Ohio university, and it gives them a baseline to start with to protect our kids.
And that would serve as a model for America. And,
Correct.
And you know, as we've heard testimony, and particularly we've heard your testimony, it boggles the mind that you know, that such initiation rituals are out there. Have you done any study into the psychology of why hazing exists and why anyone thinks it's a good idea?
Yeah, part of my testimony that I gave, I think and believe, in my opinion, our opinion, is that, you know, each year these kids, you know, we're talking 18 to 20-year-old young men who their brains are not fully developed, you know, and I think they're trying to step it up each year. And these rituals get riskier and riskier each year. And I think, honestly, it's just getting out of control, and it's going to continue to happen if there's not, you know, consequences put in place.
So at some point in the psychology of this, does someone think it's fun?
I think it's in their mind as they're trying to create secrecy and brotherhood. And, you know, if you push someone to the limit and they can stay there and be loyal to you, that creates a bond. It would be almost like in the military, when you're driving someone to see if they're able to stick to your side and the loyalty of that Greek life.
Yeah.
You know, and I sat here many nights trying to understand, you know, Stone's position that night, and I truly feel he felt he had no choice. He had to commit to what he was being involved in. I was told by another BGSU student who was in a fraternity who his mom actually took him out of BGSU because of certain emotional, his personality changed, he was doing drugs, and he had relayed back that if you did not join a fraternity and you were didn't follow the rituals, that you could no longer get in any fraternity on campus.
You were blacklisted.
Wow. Wow.
So I truly believe in my heart Stone had that in the back of his head, that, that was going to be one of the consequences, as well as, they're going to be made fun of, ridiculed, whatnot, if he chose to walk out.
Stereotyped across the campus as the kid that dropped out of
Unbelievable.
Pike.
Yeah. So, this bill is an important bill, and I hope it has a very powerful impact as you intend it to do. But obviously, there needs to be more done. There needs to be a cultural shift. And that cultural shift cannot take place unless the leadership of the universities that invite these kids in to supposedly safe places takes an active role in stamping it out. So zero tolerance sounds good to me. And thank you very much for your testimony today, and God bless you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have Wade McKenzie, and we'll do a little bit of housekeeping here. And sir, you may approach the podium and begin. And thank you for coming today.
Thank you. Chair Johnson, Vice Chair Serino, Ranking Member Williams, and members of the Workforce Committee and Higher Education Committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify in support for Senate Bill 126. My name is Wade McKenzie, and I'm here to testify in support of Senate Bill 126. On Thursday, March 4th, I came home at approximately 10:30 p.m. to find my best friend laying on the couch. This friend was Stone Foltz. Upon calling friends to come over and keep me company as I watched over him for the night, I made the decision that 911 should be called. After hearing dispatch and friends speaking of CPR, I immediately recognized the situation that was put into my hands, as I immediately started CPR in an attempt to save my friend's life. I had to proceed to do CPR as well as keep everyone calm until the first responders arrived in an attempt to save my friend's life over an event he was forced to do that I had heard previous in the week that he had not wanted to do. Minor crimes are often broken without care due to absence of strict consequences. Very few minor crimes have the ability to take a life. I have firsthand witnessed hazing take a life. Hazing is being treated as a minor crime but can lead to death. Therefore, it should not be treated as a minor crime. When physical abuse or forced consumption of substances is involved, we must have stricter consequences in order to stray people away from making the decision to haze, which can ultimately take lives. After all, hazing has taken away memories that have yet to be made, such as family vacations, weddings, late-night drives, or even a person to talk to. I'd be happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thank you, sir, for coming in and testifying today, and very, very deeply saddened that you had to have that happen to you in your college life. So thank you for coming today. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Next, we have Kimberly Moore, Dean of Students, and Ann James, Director of the Office of Community Standards at Miami University. You may approach the podium and begin.
Thank you. So Chairman Johnson, Vice Chair Serino, Ranking Member Williams, and members of the Senate Workforce and Higher Education Committee. My name is Kimberly Moore, and I'm the Dean of Students at Miami University. My colleague, Ann James, Director of Office of Community Standards, will assist me in testifying today. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today in support of Senate Bill 126. Miami University has zero tolerance for hazing, and we strictly prohibit any acts that humiliate, demean, or risk the health and safety of potential new members as a way to prove themselves or earn their way into full membership in any organization. We support our state legislators in their efforts to strengthen Ohio's laws against hazing. Hazing violates the Miami University Code of Student Conduct, the Ohio Revised Code, and the policies of every fraternity and sorority recognized by Miami University. Hazing can take many forms and can lead to devastating consequences, as you've heard. Hazing is described as any incident or activity that may cause mental or physical harm to a student looking to join an organization. Hazing is based on the premise that some members are less equal than other members and therefore less deserving of respect. It is rationalized by the philosophy that membership is earned, not learned. Hazing especially undermines new member education programs by eroding the atmosphere of mutual respect and trust necessary for groups to contribute to the positive personal growth of all members. The National Collaborative on Hazing Research and Prevention has conducted the most comprehensive national study on hazing to date, surveying more than 11,000 students from 53 universities and colleges across the United States. The study found that unfortunately more than half of college students involved in clubs, teams, and organizations experience hazing. According to a 2008 study by StopHazing.org, the most common hazing behaviors included participating in drinking games at 53%, singing or chanting in public in a situation that is not a related event, game, or practice, 31%, drinking large amounts of alcohol to the point of getting sick or passing out, 26%, being awakened at night by other members, 19%, and being yelled, screamed, or cursed at by other members, 18%. Miami University will always place the safety and welfare of our students above any perceived negative press. This is evident in the actions that the university took with respect to the horrific incident involving Tyler Perino, who you heard from at the last committee hearing on SB 126. Ann James, Director of the Office of Community Standards, will share with you the conduct process that Mr. Perino participated in.
Thank you, Kimberly. Upon learning of the incident that Mr. Perino experienced and subsequently reported, the university began a full and thorough investigation to determine what happened and to ensure the safety of our students. From the beginning of that investigation through the adjudication process, I was in awe and continue to be in awe of Mr. Perino's courage in reporting this information and his commitment to the safety of our Miami community. I want to sincerely thank Mr. Perino for stepping up and reporting the hazing he experienced and for seeing it all the way through the process to testify here in front of the Ohio Senate. The university conduct process in which Mr. Perino participated was comprised of an investigation and subsequent hearings for the organization, Delta Tau Delta, and 12 Miami University students. In addition, due to the safety concerns outlined in the report, Delta Tau Delta was suspended pending the completion of the student conduct process. This action kept the organization from operating while the investigation and hearing process took place. The outcomes of the student conduct process included the suspension of the Delta Tau Delta fraternity from Miami University for 15 years. 9 students were dismissed or permanently removed from Miami University, and 3 students were assigned other disciplinary sanctions, for example, disciplinary probation. While the university was engaged in the student conduct process, there was a separate process playing out in the legal system. The student conduct process and the criminal or legal system, legal process, are completely separate and unrelated. Oftentimes, outcomes of the student conduct process are different and can have a more significant immediate impact on the student long-term than the criminal or legal process does. The worst penalty that we as a university can give a student is dismissal, which requires a lower standard of evidence than the legal system, where a prosecutor can pursue incarceration. In this case, no student was incarcerated or found guilty of anything more than a misdemeanor through the criminal or legal process. However, 9 students were permanently removed from Miami University and are not permitted to be present on the campus or attend classes on our campus again. Additionally, there is a permanent notation on their transcripts that indicates that they were dismissed from Miami University. This past academic year of 2020-2021, we investigated 5 fraternities as a result of hazing allegations. None of those reports we received are anywhere near the severity of the case involving Delta Tau Delta. But we don't know if that's the case because there have been no physical assaults, or if we haven't had a student who is willing to speak out like Mr. Perino did. And just because hazing doesn't take a physical form as it did in Mr. Perino's case, it does not mean that other hazing activities won't have a lasting impact on our students. We fully support this legislation because it will help other students understand how serious the university takes hazing, as well as how serious the criminal system takes this behavior. This may help other students to come forward, knowing that the university and the community as a whole support them through the process. Now, Kimberly will address the initiatives and actions the university has taken to eliminate hazing on our campus. Sorry.
Thank you, Ann. Prior to the incident involving Mr. Perino, we had begun to work with students and advisors to take steps changing the culture of Greek life at Miami. This was a result of receiving several anonymous reports of hazing across multiple years, none of which provided enough information to act on through our conduct system. After Mr. Perino's hazing incident, we continued to focus on changing campus culture, and more students became active participants in being a part of a solution. The result was our Honoring Fraternity Report, which includes changes to help fraternities in particular promote courageous and ethical leadership, focus on academic excellence, and prevent some of the troubling national trends around hazing, abuse of alcohol and other drugs, and sexual and interpersonal violence. Some of those initiatives include mandatory education about fraternal values and the purpose of Greek life, an anti-hazing module, and a 2-part leadership course which students must complete to be eligible to accept an invitation of membership. New member convocation, which details appropriate and inappropriate activities, resources, and reporting options related to hazing. Greeks Step Up, an evidence-based bystander intervention program facilitated by peer educators and leaders within the fraternity and sorority community. Topics addressed include hazing, sexual violence, and alcohol and drug abuse. New member education plans and current member development plans submitted by each chapter that include a calendar of activities and description of each event prior to recruitment. A letter is also sent to parents explaining the member education process. All fraternity houses must have a live-in advisor in order to house sophomore students who are otherwise required to live on campus. Chapter leadership and advisors are required to be on site during recruitment, and the new member period was shortened to 4 weeks for fraternities. A national staff member or advisor must also be present at initiation events. Sororities have a 3-week new member experience, and social events are limited in scope and number. Members of sororities who wish to serve as a Big Sister must complete a Big Sis training session. The GPA requirement for fraternity recruitment eligibility was raised to a 2.75 from a 2.5. A scorecard was implemented reporting community standards. This report provides information on academics, service and philanthropy, chapter conduct and status, and compliance with chapter requirements. We are currently assessing the effectiveness of these efforts and will continue to adapt our anti-hazing plan to maximize success over time. We thank you for your time today, and we are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for your testimony. We really appreciate that. Any questions?
Yes, sir.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for coming in and testifying today on such an important subject, and also want to extend my thanks to the Foltz family for coming in. You display great courage in coming here today. You mentioned at Miami the live-in advisors. Mm-hmm. So tell us, I'm anxious to know a little bit more about who selects them, how are they selected, and what are their roles and responsibilities?
Sure. So through Senator Johnson, Senator Serino, the fraternities, the chapters select the live-in advisors. There's a full recruitment and employment process involved there. And they have to meet the standards set by the national organization, and that's a partnership through Miami as well. So it's, you know, they have to live in, they have to be there, they have to be present for initiation, recruitment events. They are, you know, making relationships with the students, advising, mentoring, those kind of things.
Follow? Please. So it sounds like a residence advisor in a dormitory, basically?
Yes, it's very similar.
In you know, just a question, maybe the selection process, you know, I had the pleasure of serving as an RA at one of our universities, and, you know, RAs were selected by the administration through I think the Dean of Students at the time. Why not have the university select who the live-ins are, as opposed to the organization that they're going to be monitoring selecting who they are?
So Senator Johnson and Senator Serino, it's a partnership. There's no doubt it's a partnership. And oftentimes our Cliff Alexander office, a fraternity and sorority office, helps in identifying possible candidates and does training about how, you know, what we look for and that kind of thing. So it is a partnership, but ultimately they're the employer. So that is why the final decision is really up to the chapter or the national fraternity.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Senator Reineke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, doctors, for coming in. Thank you, family, also. I know it's a difficult situation, but we appreciate it. My question, if you back up a little bit to how did the culture start to change? So it was the one incident where the student reported it. So how did it work its way up the food chain, and how long did that take? Can you help us with that a little bit?
So through to Senator Johnson, Senator Reinke, can I ask a clarifying question? When you say...
Sir, so every school's got this culture problem. So you had a student step up who testified a couple weeks ago. So did that go right to the president? Who did that go to, or how did you culturally change your process?
Sure. So it's really important to know that we started that process before Tyler's situation. And so that process took a year to work with students and to come up with that report and put forward the recommendations that went all the way through our Board of Trustees. I mean, this was a concerted university effort to put forward recommendations to really ultimately change our system. And then that was really just underway as far as implementation when this situation started to happen. So the way that this report came through with this individual, with Tyler, was I got a phone call from his mother and said, she was very upset and obviously wanted to report this. And so I had a conversation first and then invited them in to my office and said, look, I'm going to walk you through this process. Here are your options. What support do you need? And from that process, not all students want to come forward. Sometimes they want to let us know that something happened, but they don't want to attach their name to it. And Tyler wanted to kind of weigh his options, right? And he had just tremendous courage and support from his family and his parents, and he decided he really wanted to come forward. So we took a report, and that report launches an investigation process through our conduct system. And this is, again, totally separate from the criminal court system. And so at that point, Ann Shop takes over, does an investigation, and then really this is all done through the conduct process. It's not, the president is aware, but it's not like they get involved. I don't know if you want to add anything, Ann. But.
Could I just clarify?
Please.
So if it started before that incident, what was the aha moment, or what made the cultural change? So you went through the Board of Trustees. So was there an incident, or was it something that you thought you needed to change, or you thought where I'm...
Oh, sure, absolutely. So that was, we had a lot of reports that were coming in that were anonymous, and a lot of anonymous tips, and we can't do much when we don't have folks to be able to answer the questions, right? And so it was becoming clear that nationally this was becoming a problem, and of course Miami looks at itself as a leader. We have 5 alpha chapters and a number of different organizations that are headquartered in Oxford, and so this was a preemptive step to say, look, students, you're exhausted by this. The university is frustrated by this. Let's come together and talk about a plan that could make some meaningful change, both from the education and the prevention side of things, as well as the response side of things. And so it really was taking a look at the national landscape, understanding that we had a lot of anonymous tips we couldn't take action on, and said it's time to reevaluate.
So I think that's a very commendable process. So my next question would be, were the fraternities agreeable to that, and did they push back? And if not, how did you handle that?
Sure. So there were a lot of IFC members and the council that came together that were representative from students representing the fraternities, and the sororities were there, and a lot of them wanted change. I think that they were open to it. Once you started getting into live-in advisors and GPA changes, and some significant, those are heavy lifts. And once you started to get in there, there was some negotiation and some pushback. But ultimately, they understood what we were trying to achieve, which is a safer environment for fraternities and sororities to thrive on campus, because there are upsides to fraternities and sororities. There's tremendous upside, but there is an ugly underbelly, certainly. And so they understood the bigger picture. There was some negotiation around some of the harder lifts like the GPA, but ultimately they were at the table and still continue to be.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Sure. Say something about the anonymous reporting
Please.
that Kimberly mentioned. You know, that was and continues to be, you know, a barrier for us as we work to investigate these reports. We investigate every report we receive. I think that one of the reasons I'm in such support of this bill is that students may feel more empowered to make a report, attaching their name to it, if they know that not only is the university going to have zero tolerance, but that the community would also have that same level of enforcement and punishment of an act such as hazing. And so I think that's one of the reasons I'm happy to be here today to talk about that.
Any other questions? Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, Miami has, you mentioned it a little bit, a long history with Greek life, and I believe probably one of the highest percentage of students' bodies that are participating in Greek life. How pervasive were these problems when you really started to begin to implement some of these things? And I know you mentioned in your testimony that you're still assessing the effectiveness of these changes that you made, but based on a ballpark estimate, how successful do you think that they have been?
So Chairman Johnson, Senator McCauley, I think the pandemic disrupted our experiment. Certainly, I think there was just less, you know, you just start, when you start to try to change culture, it really is about the length of time you're sustaining that effort. And we just had gotten started really and gotten some momentum when the pandemic started. So that's really why we want to come back this summer, regroup with everybody and say what's working, what are pain points, and reevaluate this. I don't know if that got at your question.
Mr. Chairman, so I guess the first part of the question is how pervasive do you estimate that this was? Because of the fact that you guys, to your point, you don't shy away from Greek life, you embrace it, but there's a large percentage of the student body at Miami in particular that is part of Greek life. Yeah. How pervasive do you estimate that these problems were?
We don't know what we don't know, right? And I think this is part of the culture of individual chapters and larger organizations. And so, you know, that's a really tough question because you just don't know, and there's a part of the culture that is underground, and that's where these things start to get really dangerous. So I would really be guessing at that. But it's a factor and it matters. And we had, you know, for instance, the situation that happened with Tim Piazza, right, at Penn State, that happened at a Beta chapter. And so nationally, Beta was looking at ways to change the culture. And so that meant on our campus, Beta was going to step up and lead, you know, and really try to look at the culture, right? So when you get that collaboration from the university making efforts, from, you know, the criminal system doing some things differently, from national organizations doing things differently, now you start to get momentum, and some of the organizations that might have been problematic historically start to change, and then they can, you know, come up as a leading organization within the broader fraternal system. So I think there were certain chapters that were starting to do things differently, that were coming to the table willing to work with us and started to really get some momentum. But as far as pervasive, you never really know because there's an underground element to this.
Any other questions? Thank you so much. You know, I commend you on your efforts, and the fact that you were looking at this before an incident and cited it, I think that's commendable also. Yeah, and I hope you realize that, you know, when people are looking into something like this, you know, it comes to the attention of the public when a terrible incident happens. You know, it hits the papers and it's on TV, and you know, and it's a tragic story. But for us looking in and not being administrators and not being involved with the campus, it's very difficult for lay people or outside people to understand why, you know, university leadership can't get hold of something like this. And then when we hear testimony from the poor parents here that reveal that, you know, their son was able to very quickly ascertain places he didn't want to go. Right. You know, it just seems like there's a huge box of administration and a huge box of students, and no way to communicate, because, you know, if a kid can quickly figure something out, it just seems to people on the outside looking in that the administrators should also be able to figure that out. And then as far as how pervasive it is, you know, you would certainly find that out once you tapped into that communications network. So can you help us understand why that piece is so difficult?
Sure. Chairman Johnson, there isn't a question on whether or not students who participate think that the university is serious about hazing. There's no question. They know that the university is serious about hazing. The cost-benefit analysis, students don't think that they're going to get caught, right? They don't lead with the idea of saying, you know what, I know that I'm yearning for belonging. I know that I want to make connection and I want to be part of something, and I see all the social upside to that, right? And this is what it takes. And then they you know, that the university just has no sense for this. It's not that boxed off. Students are connecting with us, they're communicating with us, they are part of many of these solutions, but when it comes down to the ritual and being part of something, there's a pull and there's a trade-off. And so I really don't think that in practical terms, it's that separate. It's just that the university has to act on what it knows, and there's an active element here of keeping these things private, secret, and ritualized.
Well, respectfully then, can you help me understand why you don't know how pervasive it is?
Well, one is that how do you put a number to that?
Well, let me clarify that a little bit. If the communication's actually there, and, you know, why don't we know how pervasive it is? You know, you get the sense that it's very pervasive. You know, just hearing what we've heard so far, and again, the only reason we really, you know, have it on our radar screen is because of a horrible, tragic incident. Mm-hmm. You know, but it's kind of like when people go to war. You know, not everybody comes back horribly, you know, disfigured. Not everybody gets killed, but a whole bunch of people come back deeply scarred. Sure. You know, so how many people are we turning out into American society that are deeply scarred? You know, so I guess that's really what I'm trying to get at. And why can't we ascertain that? Why can't we get a good handle on what's really going on?
Jim, oh, go ahead.
I just want to, for context, I've been working in this field since 2001, and Tyler Perino was the first student who did what he did, in my experience. I cannot overstate the power that Kimberly was just talking about of our students wanting to belong and wanting to feel connection, and that sometimes that takes the form of being willing to put yourself in harm's way. I am absolutely not blaming the students for what's happened here. It's the system, it's the culture. But the number of students that I've interviewed as part of investigations who just lie because they're scared and they don't want to feel that lack of connection to that organization is tremendous. And it's not because they want to be dishonest, but they're fearful. And I just can't overstate that. And I think that is a huge barrier that we face in this work, is that nothing that I say as an administrator can disrupt that. Oftentimes, sometimes it can, and I won't stop trying, but I just wanted to make that point, that I think that's a huge elephant that we're trying to get over.
Well, I very much appreciate that, and I appreciate your honest and sincere efforts to get to the root of this. And, hopefully you're collaborating with other universities and looking at the problem across the country. And I really like the idea that you're seeing it as a cultural problem, because cultural inertia is one of the most difficult things to change.
And Chairman Johnson, I just wanted to say one other thing. The national landscape allows us to read that there's a pervasive issue, right? And on our campus, there certainly is an issue, but we just don't know how deep it goes. And so that's what I just wanted to clarify.
Very good. Senator Serino?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one quick question. We've heard today, and we heard this in previous testimony from the family at Ohio U, about, these 18 to 20-year-olds who are very often, certainly at the freshman level, are away from home for the first, living away from home for the first time. And we've heard a lot about